Thank you all for joining us on this Saturday morning. A lot of new faces for me, which I'm really excited about. I'm excited to be joined by 2020 Ellies winner Clara Varas, who won an Ellie back in 2020 and has since produced and presented her project, which was a solo exhibition at Spinello, which we'll get to look at after we go through the application requirements. My name is Amanda Bradley. I'm the Programming Senior Manager at Oolite Arts. And the Ellies is one of the programs that I oversee, and I have for the last 3 years. So I definitely urge you all to ask all the burning questions that you have about the application, advice directly from an Ellies winner, advice from someone who manages the program and who talks to artists who have won the program on the day-to-day. So please, I want to make this as casual and comfortable for everyone to, be able to voice their questions and really get out of this info session everything that they hope to. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll take us through this brief slide presentation about the application itself, and then we'll start learning a bit more about Clara's project, and she'll offer us all the advice, tips, and tricks. So I always start this presentation with just looking back at some previous grant winners, and so this is a project that just premiered last fall by Leo Castaneda, and this was a fully immersive, multi-digital interactive exhibition at the old Locust Project space that was in the Design District. Leo's actually a 2-time grant winner, so his first grant in 2018 was just to work on this video game that he was producing, and his second grant was really to create this multimedia interactive exhibition. And this is by Antonia Mendez, aka Queef Latina. This is an AR/VR drag interactive app and exhibition that's currently up, I believe, through the summer at the Mud Foundation, which is not too far in Little River. This is a spread from 2019 winner Rosemary Cromwell for a publication that she did on globalization in Miami. And this is an image of a workshop that was done in Peru by 2020 teacher travel grant winner Rebecca Quiroga. So I just want to open that up and ask if you're an artist to raise your hand, and if you're a teacher to raise your hand. So artists? Are we all artists? Any teachers? Both. Great. So most important information is applications are due by May 17th at 6 p.m. 6 p.m., not midnight. Very important, because after 6 p.m. we can't answer any more questions, and the time clock kind of runs out on submittable in the application. So please work on your applications in advance and make sure to meet that deadline. So it's just a brief history of the Ellies. So at the center there, you'll see Ellie Schneiderman, to which the Ellies are named after. She's actually the founder of what used to be Art Center South Florida, now Oolite Arts. This is what Lincoln Road looked like in the 80s when she acquired the property that is still Oolite Arts, Art Center South Florida, which was a studio space for artists back then primarily, just allowing artists to have affordable studio space in the city. And now we'll get into the nitty-gritty. So the Ellies has 4 categories, 2 of which you can apply to. The first category, which I believe most of you are here for, is the Creator Award. This is a photo of our creators at our first Ellies ceremony in 2018. And the second application that you can apply for is a teacher travel grant. So the teacher travel grant is a $5,000 award we usually give out to 3 Miami-Dade County arts teachers to go on a trip, whether it be for a workshop or kind of like a self-guided, initiated itinerary that allows them to bring that information and experience back into the art room curriculum. And then we have 2 nomination categories, the Michael Richards Award, which is named after artist Michael Richards, who's an alum of Art Center South Florida, who unfortunately passed in his studio in 9/11. And so that award is really for a later in their career artist who has spent a majority of their time giving back to the community and has really built their creative stance in the city of Miami. And the Ellies Social Justice Award This is the 4th year of this award. This is a photo of our 3 previous social justice award winners, and this award is by nomination, and it is for artists who dedicate their practice and their lives to social change. So the application is very simple. The Creator Award asks in 300 words, what do you want to do? It asks for a CV so that we can see what you've done, the trajectory of your practice, how you've grown as an artist, and 3 images or videos of your work. The Teacher Travel Grant similarly is asking 300 words on where do you want to go and why. So if you want to go to Europe, what are you hoping to learn or see in Europe that you can bring back to the classroom curriculum? I will say if you're applying as a teacher, it's really important to bring it back to what you hope to bring into the classroom from this experience, and as well a CV, which can be a teaching CV, it can be more of a resume format, it can also include your personal experience as an artist, because we know most art teachers are artists themselves. I will shout out that we do have virtual office hours. I'm not sure that there's any slots available for April 25th, but I basically do one-on-one consultations on Zoom with anyone who's interested in talking more specifically about their idea or their proposal. You can sign up for either 2 dates on our website. You don't necessarily have to remember this strange link, but they're both on our website, and my cards are at the front too, which you can send me an email and we can chat as well. And then we'll get into the Q&A. I'm sure you all have a lot of questions, but I want to give Clara a chance to talk a little bit about what your project was when you proposed it, and I'll pull up some visuals of what it became.
Hey everybody. I happen to have here exactly what I wrote.
Oh, perfect.
For my, where it says, tell us about your project, 300 words or less. And I'll just read a little bit. I basically just said exactly what I was going to do, which more or less, I came as close to it as possible. I said, an exhibition of sculptural and mixed media works that make use of discarded furniture, metals, and other refuse along North River Drive and the surrounding area. This body of work will be informally based on the genre of traditional landscape and still life painting, while also commenting on the plight of displaced persons, the fragile infrastructure of working class neighborhoods, and the transient nature of contemporary life. So that was it. I kept it short and sweet, and then maybe put a little bit more of, using my artist statement, a little bit more of that into there, but just short and sweet, and that's what I predominantly kept it at, and I don't do sketches or anything like that, so it was important to me that the grant worked with me during the artistic process, where like, I had something that went in a different direction. As long as you tell them about it in an email or email them, they allow you to make changes. So that was important to me.
So one thing I want to note about the way that you structured your statement is the way that you answer the questions, right? Because 300 words is not a lot, and sometimes these ideas are very big. And so I always tell artists that the most important thing that your first sentence is what is it? And I think the first thing you said was an exhibition of work that does this, right? So give the definition up front so the juror who's reading this can already begin to visualize, and everything else that you're describing becomes supplementary to build the conceptual narrative behind it, the reason why you're best suited to do it, why it's important to you. But up front, your first sentence really should be, what is it? Because you want to paint that picture from the start so that everything that comes after it and the 250 words that are left can just build upon that. So I want to open it up to see if any of you have any specific questions regarding the application or with Clara. I'll just scroll through some of her images of her exhibition, which was a solo show at Spinello Projects, which I think happened about a year or so after.
Right, it was 2021, so after after the pandemic, well, we were still dealing with it, and a lot of the venues were dealing with it. So, yeah, it was 2021, June of 2021.
Right. Yeah, go ahead.
In your project, did you specify like, oh, I intend to create like 10 pieces in this amount of time, this size?
No, that wasn't necessary. I had a space, so that was a big thing that I had going for me, and I knew that I wanted to put certain things in this space or that space, but as far as I know, there's no requirement as to the amount of work or the size of the work.
That's my question in general about what is a project. I mean, what is ongoing work and what is a project conceived for this particular grant?
We're not asking you to imagine a project that's outside of your practice, right? So if you're working on a body of work and you need funding to continue it or to push it forth, apply. And it can be a grant for a creation of work that can become an exhibition, that can become a publication, that can live online, whatever that final form is. So there's no issue with applying for a project that you've already been working on, because that means that you have the language and you have the media to use for the grant application, for sure. Yes.
Hi. Can you speak a little bit to timeline and location? Do you favor projects that are within South Florida, or is something travel related interesting to you all? And of course, does it have to be completed within a year or two?
Yeah, so the grant timeline that's written is for a year. We have, because of COVID, which was something we had to learn through, had cases where artists asked for extensions because, again, their venues are backlogged and they need to get on a schedule that's 18 months out. And so, like Clara said, a lot of it is just communication. So if you get your grant, you talk to your venue and they're like, hey, I can give you a slot that's 18 months out and that's 6 months outside your grant period, tell us sooner, because we're very flexible and we understand the constraints that artists work within, so we're happy to work with you. But I think it's a lot about communication and just showing that there's progress and it's not just at a standstill. And then you said locations. So our grant is actually, we're not required to have projects that operate only in Miami or the US. We've had plenty that have happened internationally, plenty that have happened online. A lot of our 2019 winners transferred to an online presentation during the pandemic. We don't have that strict requirement that it happen in Miami. It is a grant only for Miami-Dade artists, but the idea is that the funds will help elevate your careers. So it should be a project that you think will push you to the next level in your career, but does not have to happen in Miami. Yes.
If your project is a show, an idea for an exhibition, do you have to have the venue secured or locked in?
No, definitely not. I think in Clara's case, she had a relationship with Spinello as a gallerist, and it was ongoing work that you were thinking of working on, working towards.
Correct. It was, based on the work that what my work is about, and also I knew I was having a show, and there were, like Amanda said, a lot of the venues were backlogged during that time after COVID. So I had that going for me. So it was a continuation of my work.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a venue.
Yeah, we don't ask specifically. We don't ask a question on venues. We don't ask a question on budget. We're really looking for ideas.
Okay.
How can you illustrate this idea? Why are you best suited to present this project, and why now?
Okay, so
It won't count against you. No. Yes.
Is there preferential or any kind of bias against some work over another? Like if you're more of a social, interactive artist, or you're talking about minorities or something, it's that more important than just introspective work when the things are being juried?
No. So one thing about the Ellies is we get different juries every year, and it's both local and national, whether it be artists, curators, or arts professionals. So it's completely new every year who's jurying, and I think some things naturally rise to the top based on the world that we're living in. Like in COVID, a lot of things were about isolation and loss and things like that. But I think that that's the work that artists were making at the time, and that was very introspective. But definitely no. Our jury changes every single year. They're the ones that decide. And if you look back at our, previous Ellies winners, you'll see that we've funded a huge variety of topics and projects. So, yes.
You just mentioned that budget isn't really considered, essentially when we get grant money, right? So then what determines how much money somebody gets?
Yeah, so the funding is dependent on the jury process. So, part of what comes into play is how the applications rank. But also we're entrusting these professionals that we've asked to jury applications to make financial decisions. I think one thing I will say is that Ellies is a support grant. It's not a funding agent. So everyone wants to get $25,000, but that is not necessarily the sole purpose of the Ellies. We're not trying to just fund 3 projects. We're really trying to allow for support for artists, and this support may not be the full budget that you need, but it can be enough funding for you to get started and take it to a venue or take it to another grant and say, hey, I already got 10K, can you match that? And so one thing I always tell artists is, we don't ask for a budget because, again, we're just trying to support the artist practice and the project. But what I have noticed in the grant process is a lot of the funding that comes from the Ellies allows artists to use it as leverage to secure venues. They mention it in other grants like Wavemaker or any of the Miami-Dade County grants, which allows those juries to realize that this is something that's happening regardless of their funding, which gives them, a sense of confidence. So leveraging support is also something that I would suggest, and maybe Claudia, you can talk about if you've done that in the past or how that's come into play.
Yes, a lot of the nonprofits and stuff like that is a great way to go as far as the venues, and with knowing that they may have, the Ellies and Oolite behind it, that'll, definitely help you out with your proposal to, for example, for a venue. So it's a good thing where that gives them, like Amanda said, a vote of confidence and help you, secure a venue if you're going that route.
Yeah, we've had a few artists who've won the Ellies who have asked for letters, like stating so-and-so has been funded by us in this amount, and it's allowed them, I think, most particularly with public art, allow them to go to like city or government agents and say like, hey, I have funding, I have the backing of this institution, and so now I really would like to get on the schedule, and I'd really like to get, access to be able to produce this project. So I would say as far as expectation of funding, with the Ellies, it's kind of out of your control. We have had artists who mention budgets in their 300 words, but again, it's not, just because you say 25K doesn't mean you're going to get 25K. It's because everyone will say 25K. But yeah, what we're really trying to do, and I think you can see from the amount of artists we fund every year, is really spread support to artists in the city of Miami. So did that kind of help?
No,
Okay.
that's,
Yeah.
In the 300 word essay, should you be saying like, okay, this is what I need the money for?
Yeah, I think similar to location, like if you have a location, you can mention it, but if you don't, it's not going to count against you. We have had artists who've mentioned budgets. It doesn't mean that they got the amount that they mentioned, but I think it's up to you if you feel like mentioning it towards the end or if it's going to take away from you describing the project. If it doesn't, then maybe I mention it, yeah. Any more questions? Yeah.
For the attachment of your previous work, I think it was like 3 images. Can you include a link to a body of work that you want to expand on? That's like more than an image.
You can. You can cheat. We have had people do that in the past, but I think the expectation is that they may not scroll.
Because it's not flat, it's interactive. So I don't know how it works.
Right. So you can include a video or a link. So if you want to include like one image and 2 videos, just make sure you're not going over the 3. If you are going over the 3, just note that they're not going to look at more than 3. So at your own risk. It won't keep you from doing that. I will say if you are planning to include video or links to things, make sure that the sites are public or that you include a password somewhere, because if we can't access your videos, that means, you know, they don't get to see the material. So,
One more.
yeah.
Is there any advantage or disadvantage to maybe in the 300 words speaking about friends who you're working with on projects? It's obviously an individual award, correct? So not a collective thing. So talk to us a little bit about that. Do you frown upon or favor projects that bring in some of our collaborators?
We definitely don't frown upon. So what I will say is the applicant will be the winner.
Right.
So whoever's name is on the application, they will win. Whether it's a collective or a duo, one person is responsible for receiving the funds and will get all the credit for winning the award. And that's just tax granting purposes. We can't make it a collaborative grant. It gets really complicated. But we have had, you know, winners who do work in collectives and they mention the other members in the 300 words, or we have had winners win for community engaged projects that calls upon other artists to produce work or contribute, and they've mentioned names, and that's fine. So I think as long as the application is coming in one person's name and that's clear, mentioning collaborators or that this project will engage other artists in the community is fine listing names, yeah. Nothing else, guys? Burning questions?
I have a question. Yeah. What is the most important part of the application? Being the previous history, where I'm going to go, where I am, where I'm going to go, and the 3 pieces that I'm going to present?
What do you mean, like the 300 words or the images?
Yeah. No. It's like, it's not a, you know.
Are you talking about the
biography.
teacher or the creator?
Oh, no, I'm a teacher.
Okay.
It's not a biography. It's the idea.
Right.
Is that what's more important? That's what I'm trying to, ask.
Um,
If I did this, and this before, and this, but what I'm doing now, or I mean.
yeah. So in the project description, and I'll see what your opinion is, because I know this is not your only grant and you've worked on multiple projects, but they really have to work in tandem. So don't use the 300 words to talk about things that you've done and then spend the last 50 talking about what you hope to do. Like I said, I think off the bat, say, this is what I want to do, this is why, and this is how. Because the first thing that they come across in the application is the written portion, and then once they have that in their mind, then they're looking at images. So then the images should help illustrate some of the things you said. So you can definitely use past projects, and Clara, maybe you have, specific advice, because you very concisely proposed a project and used past work. But I personally think that they need to work in tandem. What you say and what you show should really reflect one another.
Exactly. I was gonna say the same thing. I think, you're gonna have someone sitting there that's gonna look over a lot of projects.
Mhm.
So I think for me, one of the most important thing is that whatever you propose, get, it's previous work that supports and reflects that proposal to the best of your ability, That's the most important thing to me, that you read this and then you see work that supports that.
Yeah.
Because although you may have done a lot of previous work before, that person doesn't have that whole scope before their eyes. What they have is your idea and then the supporting material.
Yeah. Sorry, and just to add to that, I will say that if you want to show a previous work that isn't necessary, say you're proposing public art and you've never done public art, but your practice, it's really just moving it to a larger scale and something like that, sketches are great. I always suggest for artists, I mean, we've had people literally scan hand sketches, but it really does show the jury that like you've thought it through. You've thought about what the final form can be. And so if it's something that you feel like is so different in media than something you've done, try a sketch. There's tons of artists and others you can also reach out to for renderings or stuff like that. But it can be a mix of those things. It can be kind of a sketch of where you want to go, but showing, you know, where you came from. So, sorry, I'll go to you. Yes.
It's my turn?
Yes.
I have a question about the CV related to the dead COVID years, where everything was canceled and funding, in my case, was even retracted. How do you do that? COVID in your CV, or you put creating work, because there is a dead period.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've all experienced that. I mean, I
Right,
think
but how do you present it in the CV?
I think if there's a few years where you don't show, just skip those years. I mean, the jury is going to understand. We all lived through this pandemic together, fortunately.
No, I know, but I was
Um,
wondering how if that is a consideration that needs to be illustrated
I don't think.
for the dead time.
Yeah, I don't think as an artist you should worry about that. I think the
Okay.
jurors that we have selected completely understand that those years are in shambles for a lot of artists, and that projects from 2019 are only happening now. So don't worry too much about that.
They are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, how are the jurors exactly looking at the images? Are they all in a room together with the images projected, or are they at home behind their cheesy little laptop?
It's a mix of both. So we do everyone rates applications individually for confidentiality. Nobody else can see one another's scores, and then we do come together and review after scores are in. So it's a mix of both,
But come together physically?
physically.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Because, and this also applies. In other words, my work is extremely detailed, and a lot of the pieces are big. So to understand it at all, you have to look at a detail shot.
Yeah, or you can include dimension maybe as a caption for the work, or you know, if you want to talk, like I think if you have a spot for one image, go into Photoshop and add text at the bottom that explains, or in the caption of the work itself, the file name, you can include size, which might help, or show it as an installation rather than just an image. And if you're only showing a detail, make sure your file name says detail of.
Okay.
Gabby?
Is there a limit as to how long the videos can be?
I can't remember. I think it's probably 3 or 5 minutes. Yeah, but I think it's stated on the FAQ, but I can double check.
You can combine it, so we can do the
You
two
could
photos
do-
and like a
Yeah, you could do 2
Video
photos, 1
process.
video. Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna put all 6, you can, but they might not make it to the videos. You know what I'm saying? Because images come first. Yeah.
three, so,
Jen?
If we want to apply with someone that maybe works with that Oolite, can we do that? Like, and do we need a letter of support?
I don't know what you mean.
So, like, say I want to work with you, and we be like the photographer, or we make a collaborative
I
project.
can't apply.
Is
I'm
that-
ineligible. I'm sorry.
As an artist, are we able to apply and write you in?
I'm not sure. I would have to figure that out. But yeah, anyone on staff is ineligible for funding and support from the organization because we run the programs. You can most definitely apply with a project idea. Like I said, in collaboration, knowing that you have a partner on the project, one person's going to get credit for it and get the actual funding. And you can use funding however you want. There is, when you get the grant, a form that you have to fill out that helps us understand how the funds are spent. But if you're working on a film or you need a photographer, you can budget, for a photographer. So yeah, if you have another photo friend besides me, you're welcome to work with them, use them. Yes.
So, I know you addressed the collaboration
that were both applying, and that her name was mentioned, but in actuality,
I'm confused. So wait, you're both applying with the same idea? Just
No.
separate names? Okay.
So two of us are applying for different ideas, but, she's a collaborator with my project. So would potentially that hurt her application?
No, I think,
I mean, officially, I know it shouldn't.
yeah, no, it definitely won't, especially if they're two separate ideas. So you can apply multiple times for the Ellies. I always forget to say this, but artists submit 3 and 4 applications for 4 different ideas. So you don't only have to submit one idea. You can submit.
Same year, same.
Yeah, you can submit multiple. I mean, I wouldn't submit more than 3, just because then it's like, what does this person really want to do? But yeah, you can submit multiple applications. We've had artists submit 2 applications and one of them won. One of them ranked higher than the other. And so definitely if you feel like you have multiple ideas, put them out there. I don't think it'll hurt as long as you're both not applying with the same idea under different names, because that will be very confusing. But Jen.
So I'm wondering if it matters, like, say the Ellies funded, a lot of catalogs last year, would you be less interested in those kind of projects the next year?
That's up to the jury. So if someone asks something similar, and I think, you know, various topics rise to the top every year, depending on the year that we've had, I think as a collective community, but the jury changes every year. None of the jurors that are on the jury this year were on last year, so it's completely fresh eyes, and so they don't have that background knowledge to what was selected, you know, last year. So there's not really bias in that sense.
How much does it cost to apply?
It's free. Yes, all of our applications are free.
I have a question. You know, I have multiple, obviously, ideas and whatnot, and there's one project that I'm working on that's, I can't present anything yet, but I can describe the idea. There's no pictures yet, because I'm still working on collecting the stuff to do that, which is a social-oriented, you know, situation. Would that make sense? 1 over 3 applications, or?
You can try. I think for us it reads as an incomplete application in a sense, because we're trying to give the jurors as much information as possible. And so even if your attachments are text-based, whether it be research or whatever, something that can show that this project is happening, it's in planning, it's in progress. So it doesn't necessarily only have to be a visual. I don't know if you've ever had that come across that where you didn't have the visuals ready, but you could have, you know, you could put something out there.
A drawing, text, that, you know, it's especially more conceptual work. I mean, it doesn't have to be,
Sketchbook.
exactly a sketchbook. So anything that helps support that main idea, that main proposal, that counts towards it.
Yes. We do not. It is an anonymous jury. We do announce it at the ceremony in October. But
That's great.
yes. Any more questions before we briefly break and then get into another conversation? Yes.
Did I get it right that you said we could apply for different projects?
Yes.
So
You can submit multiple for different ideas. Don't submit multiple for the same idea, but okay. Any other last minute questions for the application? Yes.
What if your practice is based in Miami, like you're a Miami-based artist, but your address doesn't necessarily reflect that? Does that automatically disqualify you?
You have to be a Miami-Dade County resident. So you will have to have proof of residency, whether it be like utility or something like that. Yeah. All right. Any last questions for Clara on her experience with the grant, managing it, dealing with it, answering emails, budgeting?
Other than the financial grant, which is obviously important, were you able to get other sort of support while you were doing your project, maybe like mentorships or, you know, technical help for figuring out things that you wanted to do?
For me, it was great to have, Oolite was really good about getting the word out, especially during a time where, it was summer, it was after the pandemic, and also anytime you're associated with an organization that's in it for the long haul, and that's been here from the beginning, like Oolite is a great thing, and also helps you. There's also curators looking at your work when you submit. So the more you can get your work out there in front of eyes that then go on to do other things, it also was a great springboard for other things to come. So that and the financial aspect was a very good thing, because when do you have money set aside for a solar project?
I have one last question for Clara, if there's no more from the audience, but I guess your experience with the grant, so I think sometimes it's intimidating to apply to grants as artists, and it's easy to talk yourself out of it. In my experience, the Ellies application is one of the least intimidating, because it's not asking for a budget and a location and a understanding of what the final form will take right at the forefront. But how was your experience, reporting and budgeting and talking about the things that nobody really wants to deal with throughout your grant?
It was a very comfortable experience from the point of, for example, the budget. I don't do a lot of framing, but for this particular project, I did have framing, and what I had done is I had put more budget towards materials, and then I had a separate budget for framing and third-party printing. And during the middle of the project, I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting, I have all this other materials that I have set aside in the studio, but I'm having more of a need in the framing and printing. What do I do now? And I just emailed them and told them, look, my project has changed, the artistic process, now I'm having more need here. And it was great because they were able to, yeah, that's fine, we can change it. So to have something have a grant that wasn't so rigid, that was a good thing for me, because I don't do sketches or anything, everything is decided by the materials and what I have at hand and the artistic process.
Yeah, we don't ask for receipts. I will just put that out there. I think that a lot of the intimidation that comes with grants is really the budgeting and keeping all the admin in order. And so you have 2 reports. You sign a contract at the forefront, you get 50% of funding upon signing. You have an interim report due 6 months after saying, this is where I'm at, I've spent the first 50%, I'm ready for the second half, my project's gonna happen on this date in this place. You get the next half of funding, so you have all 100% of your funding before you turn in a final report. You present your project, you submit a final report with documentation, whether that be press or install shots or a link to where it lives online. We don't ask for receipts because we also don't want to necessarily have to, nickel and dime it. You guys set your budgets at the forefront, so if you have 5,000 and you say 1,000 is my artist fee and the remaining 4,000 are going to be materials, framing, and whatever, you just fill that out in an Excel that automatically totals for you, and you submit it twice. So it is, like Clara said, it's not very rigid. We understand that prices have changed, prices are continuing to change, so we anticipate those things, and as long as you can turn in, these forms in the reports, then you are A-okay. The key to this grant, I think, is really communication, because our goal with giving you funds is for this project to be realized and for us to support that process and being able to also promote it. So I am constantly in touch with our communications team, trying to make sure that we're not missing any Ellies projects that are happening, whether they be in Miami or in Europe. So we'll constantly be in touch about materials and images so that we can help amplify your reach as well. Yes?
Is there so for example, let's say that you use the funds, or you use the funds to create a show that went on to goes to
We
one
do
of the
not-
city galleries, the artists?
Yeah,
Figure
it's,
out,
we give you funding to create work and to do your project. We're not interested in collecting any funding in any of our programs. If you sell out of your studio, if you sell your Ellies grant, that's for you. We're just looking to support the practice and the project. So that money will be dealt with between your gallerist and you or however, but we don't get involved in any of that. We just give funding.